One rather interesting suggestion, I think it was from you, Julie, you mentioned that you work with the faculty to help them to pronounce Chinese. So I've had that struggle with my staff. I produced a little document to explain to them, since we deal with Chinese people all the time, how to pronounce some basic Chinese names. We don't do the tones. Um, but how have you found that? What was the reception of that? Has that been helpful?
Well, as I said, this is only my second year at the school, so and we haven't been together really since March of last year. But I'm hearing more from advisors and from teachers saying, "Oh, I made sure that before I had this meeting that I I found out how to pronounce a few names." And so I'm hearing more of that. And as part of our upcoming professional development, we'll be talking more about the cultural competencies. But this is why this is important. I was covering an English class back in the fall for a colleague via Zoom, and I was taking attendance, and I said the girl's name, and her last name was spelled H-E, and I pronounced her name Huh, which
Well,
is the way you say it. Excuse me. Worst timing, worst timing. So the name is pronounced Huh. And she was so excited. And she said, I have been called he for 4 years. And she said, crazy. And she said, you're the first teacher who said it correctly. And then she wrote to me later after class. And so names it's important. It's your identity. So we may think it's a small thing, but it's huge to the individual student.
Exactly, exactly. Very nice. So I'm thinking that maybe that would be helpful for people if we made something like that available on our website, and just a little downloadable. How do you pronounce? I've had, when I've taught at an undergrad level, I've prepared such documents, and because otherwise people gloss over all that. They just don't know what to do with it. You know, what do you do with the X's and the ZHs and all that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Yep.
So that's very good. That's a very good suggestion. Um, uh, one of the things I was wondering about, I think you also mentioned that you use a children's Bible to make it more accessible to people.
Right. So the religion teacher, in interviewing her, she mentioned that this is one thing that she does for girls that really have a limited, like their English is I'm not gonna say it's poor, but it's definitely, they're challenged and they're still using a translator, handheld translator. So she just decided to purchase for the girl a children's Bible, and it was so much easier for her, and it really developed her comprehension. So she does this as needed, individually, helping as a student appears on her radar that needs a little more help, she will differentiate with a children's Bible.
Okay, well so I don't know if you're aware, but there a group in San Jose has arranged for the printing of what we call Duejiao, or parallel bilingual Bibles.
Good.
Bilingual New Testament, bilingual Old Testament, and I can help to make that available. I think there are a lot of people who are wondering, what do you do with students, especially if some of their language is a little archaic and so forth, the phrasing. Now, just as in English, there are different translations of the Bible. Also in Chinese, there are different translations. I'll let you know a little bit about this, but there's a Catholic translation that has a long history and a Protestant one, and they use different ways to transliterate names of cities, Jerusalem, names of prophets, names of saints, apostles. So it makes for a little bit of a mess, because people who have the Protestant Bible have completely different words for some of the same ideas and so forth. But it can be very helpful. So that's something we're trying to make available to people and make people aware of. And I was also thinking, I don't know if this would be useful for people, especially for new students, would a bilingual mass card be helpful, so you could see the English and the Chinese? Because you mentioned that you bring them to go to a Chinese mass. I think that's extremely valuable, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, this thing that was so foreign, here it is unfolding in my language.
Correct.
That's really incredible. So having those sorts of materials, I'm thinking it might be valuable. Our organization is thinking of making those things available. Um, do you think there would be a need for that?
Absolutely. That'd be a great resource.
Okay.
We project everything on a projector screen in the chapel. It's all in English, but we project everything. So it is convenient for even the students who do speak English, but they're not Catholic as well. That's what we do because we're in a small community, doesn't have a lot of options for other masses in other other languages up here. So that's what we do.
We also project all liturgies and prayer services in the auditorium where we have mass, and the projections are multilingual. So if something is read in English, it's proclaimed. If something is proclaimed in English, it's projected in Spanish right now because of our Hispanic population. But when we do the multilingual intercessions, we have the language that is spoken and the English translation both projected so that they can see how the language is written in typeface, whether it's a Mandarin or whether it's Philippine or Spanish or Vietnamese, so that they can see and do a comparison of the two. We think that's a great thing. I mentioned to Thomas that I'm just thinking about, Julie just reminded me of so much things that maybe we take for granted. I told my head of school, I said, as I was making this list, I said, I'm pretty impressed that we're on a good path of what we've been doing, but I see a lot of places where, there's room for more creativity and to expand. But in the formation of Eucharistic ministers, we take great strides to talk about who comes to communion. For example, the Vietnamese community, this generation, a little bit less than the previous, is in my experience, and certainly the refugees and the migrants who have come. But they come to communion with their arms crossed in front of them like this. They don't receive in the hand. And some of our, faculty are like, why don't they receive in the hand? It's like, it's a cultural thing of respect and of reverence, of sacred reverence. So being able to recognize that. But all those type of etiquette things, like how you receive a business card in Japan with both hands, right? And you keep it in front of you until your meeting is. I only know that because my father was an international salesman and he taught us that. But things, that you would, Julie says, when you can pronounce a name correctly, or you can say, oh, I've traveled to your part of Vietnam, or I've been in that part of Brazil. It's an instant connection, and there's some homecoming in that. There's some comfort, in that type of accompaniment. And that's really, it's a type of accompaniment that we have for our international students in pronouncing their names correctly, recognizing that they have different holidays and religious celebrations. And, even in our international, we do have a world religions class, and they love to be in that and share from their perspective. The instructor there allows them to come and to teach the class, on Hinduism and from their experience, or Buddhism. Accompaniment, that's a word that I think describes a lot of what our work in ministry has been about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was very impressed by your, as I said, welcoming people in from so many different cultures in so many diverse ways and being so attentive to that. That's really something else.
Shay.
So one other thing I was wondering is this. So somebody had mentioned that, you're referring to Taiwan or the mainland as Red China, or, there are different landmines that you could step on, but there are also different things that will be helpful for people to understand that, for example, maybe they don't know that even though they speak Chinese on Taiwan and on the mainland, they use different characters, traditional versus simplified, things like that. Maybe some sort of cultural competency would be helpful, as well as knowing what landmines there are to not step on too heavily. I don't know. If we would try to compile something like that, if that would be useful, and if anybody would want to be an advisor on that, like this would be helpful for us to understand. We don't quite get X, Y, or Z about this or that culture. So I don't know if that would be sort of helpful, or if you already have resources like that for China or for other cultures.
Yes, you have to be very careful of the three T's: Tiananmen, Tibet, Taiwan, and now I would actually add Hong Kong to that list because of the recent change well, in the in the government and the expectations and the new world order. It's very sensitive. And then even talking about the Dalai Lama, going back to 2008 and having conversation about the Dalai Lama in a class, it really it caused a lot of consternation with two of my Chinese girls that were very upset that we were discussing him in a glowing form. And they said he is a splittist. He's terrible. You know, why are you talking about him? But again, those teaching moments are very, very powerful. But you have to then back down and not push the issue because it's very sensitive to them. So I would include the Dalai Lama and further conversations about Tibet and that as well. And now, of course, you have the situation with the Uyghurs.
Yes, and we're all told certain things, we have certain cherished views. They become a part of our assumptions, and these are we have to be careful about that. But that's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
One of the things that in talking about that was Dominican High School in Whitefish Bay that had the letter sent home to their parents about their international Chinese students who were staying in quarantine before they came back. But anytime something happens in the world in global, which has global ramifications, not necessarily crisis or something like that, with the counseling department and campus ministry, the pastoral office here, we're pretty tandemly to, we meet immediately and say, we need to speak to our students and their families who are from that part of the world. So we've had two Iranian families in our community in the last 25 years, two families related to each other, and to make sure that those students feel safe on the campus. If they are experiencing any type of bullying or discrimination, anything like that we know about it immediately and can address it. Or if there's a disaster, a natural disaster in El Salvador, we get our El Salvadorian students together and say, let us know if you have family there, what we can do, how we can help, what you need, to support. So being able to have that kind of crisis response to things like that, not only to family needs, but also to opportunities that might come up where it's ugly and they might feel, discriminated. We had an experience with our international students in August at the uniform store, where the clerk in the uniform store said, why did you come back to this country? And why didn't you stay in China? So we immediately, when we found out, called the leadership team together and addressed it with the owner, the corporate owner. And I think we're still in negotiations about whether or not we're going to continue using that company. Of course, they said, that person did not represent the views of the company and so on, and they were going to do some training and formation, which we hope will happen. But, the student said to their house parent, this happened to me today with my other friend. And so sure enough, investigating, found out that was true. So things like that, even though that's part of our, again, being an accompaniment, I think. So just being aware of things like can be crisis or just can be plain old ugly discrimination. So
being very transparent with parents, especially, like we've been very different. We actually never closed for COVID. Even in the spring, we had borders on campus and we've been in person this whole year. And it's hard telling a family in China when they watch CNN and see New York City and LA and we're a small town in Kansas. So we've been extremely transparent and very frequently communicating with parents about everything. It's very important.
I was impressed to hear about how people use Zoom for that purpose and even sharing events on campus and religion. I'm sure helpful as well. If there's good liturgy, I'm sure it's helpful to let them see what the heck is going on inside that chapel,
Mhm.
or these retreats. So that's sharing and bringing people in. That's quite amazing.